Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, or Deadly Reckoning Part 2. This is the final, supposedly, or at least final for Tom Cruise, maybe, Mission Impossible film. It is the 8th one, and we've seen, since, I guess, Rogue Nation, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, Christopher McQuarrie has been at the helm. This is sort of a culmination of the entire series, giving it its sort of wrap-up movie. Like, this is, the stakes couldn't be higher, the stunts couldn't be more expensive, everything's crazy. This is a big, giant movie. And I think it plays in a lot of ways like any Mission Impossible. That's kind of how they do. You go when you stop a thing because something real bad will happen to the world, probably. But I think some of the sheen and some of what worked about the Mission Impossible films doesn't really happen here. And everyone said like, oh, it's the worst one or it's fallen off. I don't want to be the dramatic internet person, and I don't actually feel that way. I think 2's still the worst. This is still fun and decent. If you're wanting to see a fun Mission Impossible movie, I think you're fine, whatever. But, this is the final reckoning. Some would say Deadly Reckoning Part 2, but this is it, And so the stakes have to be insane. And the whole plot of this movie is basically like Ethan Hunt has to find a way to turn off the AI before the AI, or the entity, gets access to the world's nuclear missiles, basically. It keeps going from country to country and taking control of them until it gets to the U.S., which would of course be bad, because I guess the U.S. has, I don't know why all these countries have so many nuclear weapons. Like, there's never a part like, hey, maybe we shouldn't have, maybe we should get rid of these, because it seems like a bad idea. But whatever, they didn't really discuss that, but they also got a lot going on. But it's basically like the entity is going to blow up the entire world. Ethan has to go and talk to the entity and then get these various things to make it stop working entirely and trap it and all this stuff. Because of that, and because the stakes are complete annihilation of everything in the entire world, and it feels very like high stakes and everything, that sort of ruins what I like about these movies. Because these movies are MacGuffin hunts. And the way a MacGuffin works, despite everyone has like these weird theories, Hitchcock made it up, it works for a specific purpose. Basically, it could be anything, honestly. It's just like the thing that the people in the movie are going after. And oftentimes, you as the audience don't really care what that is. It could be the rabbit's foot, it could be the knock list, it could be the list of names or something. It doesn't matter. It could be anything. It's sort of undefinable, and you as the audience, it doesn't really matter that you know the definition or the meaning. It just matters that it is there because it's something for you to follow. And often in these, I forget, like, oh right, what was the thing? And then as they get to the end of the movie, I'm like, oh, the ball bearing things, right? Yeah, that was before. Because you're so into the stunts, you're so into Ethan Hunt doing his thing, and Benji with Simon Pegg, and with Ving Rhames' character as Luther. You're following them, And the stakes, although high and could do really bad stuff, which they clearly illustrate oftentimes, you don't really care, and you're just there to watch them do cool stuff. In this movie, you're very aware that everything's going to go kablooey and it's going to be extremely bad, and the stakes are always brought up all the time. And Ethan Hunt, or Tom Cruise's performance in it, he actually looks stressed, more stressed than I've ever seen him in any of these movies. He looks really extremely worried, which is really interesting to me. I think it's like the movie's very much like, hey, this is it. This is the big thing. So I get doing the MacGuffin thing sort of doesn't work, because even if we need the poison pill to connect to the Pavlova or use the chrysalis key or whatever, it's essentially we understand the meaning of what he's doing within these things, and so it ruins the MacGuffin, because the MacGuffin has to stay to really work, has to be undefinable, and all the things they're going after are definable, which makes this film a lot less loose. It makes it a little more straightforward, and that means it's boring as crap. If you're sitting there but I hate when things are not defined and stuff, that's horrible, and I'm I'm sorry that you are horrible at taking in art and stuff. Now everyone has their own taste, I guess, and yours was bad. I think the reason when I brought up in that little short thing that I find Tom Cruise, he's kind of more like a silent film star. But silent film stars, again, you didn't need a lot of stuff, and people would just follow it, and these crazy things would happen. And in Final Reckoning, they change that. Now, also, I think they have less faith in the audience than I've ever seen them have, in particular, when they'll cut back to things in previous films. Now, there's certain ones that I think are a little more warranted, but there's others where it's like when they're talking about certain things and like showing it on screens and stuff, but at the same time, like, they will, like, the guy who they meet from Mission Impossible 1, when they cut back to him, I thought that was unnecessary. They cut back to a lot of stuff. And I really am sick of, like, the cutting back thing, because it really feels like everyone's has no faith in you as an audience. They're just like, well, you're too dumb and you don't give a shit or whatever. And this film's playing it that way. But, like, you know, if it's the last one, I think one of the things about, if we're going to do the whole MCU thing, the end of Endgame, they're just throwing everybody out. They really didn't care if you didn't get it or not. They're like, look, if you're here, this is on you at this point. And I wish films would actually have that level of confidence, which this film often does not. Well, as for the action sequences, I think the underwater thing in the submarine often could get very surreal and weird in terms of its shots, and it was all lined up very well. But like in particular, where like when the water kind of like tilts and stuff, there's a shot in Fallout that does a similar thing. So Macquarie clearly likes to play around with those, and also like when he is kind of like goes unconscious under the Arctic, and his camera kind of goes upside down, so it looks like he fell on a bed of ice or something. That was really amazing and impressive. And I think like that sequence, I really felt it, even though he's on a submarine at the bottom of the ocean and the submarine's moving and like all this crazy nonsense, but it really works. You know, I'm supposedly does all his own stunts. I don't know like how that works, and I don't think it really was that deep in the ocean if they're filming down there like they were. I thought that was maybe one of the better sequences. And I don't know if there's anything that rivals like the last time with the bike jumping and the train going, being crazy and all that. But I did think that was good. But then it becomes, in some places, I think one thing that holds this film back is, without being its usual kind of MacGuffin hunt thing, it sort of just becomes like a Saturday morning action adventure show. In fact, there's one part where, the biplane scene very much plays like I was like, this is like watching Speed Racer with my kids. Like, this is very weird. The scene is like, I'm going to go this way, Ethan, and for you to follow me, you would have to follow a biplane, which I have. And it's, because the technology can't get it and all this stuff. And I almost felt like Trixie would be like, but the Mach 5 can't even go that fast. We'll be destroyed. And go, don't worry, Trixie. I have something up my sleeve or something like that. And like, if Trixie had come out just then and Tom Cruise just pretending to Speed Racer, that would have totally worked. Because it's like the same logic. And so a lot of these times where like Ethan Hunt or Tom Cruise is off doing this thing and it seems crazy, but the setup for him to do it feels extra dumb this time. It really does feel like an action cartoon where like, why would you do that? We know you're just doing it for the set piece. But usually they like dress it up a little. In this one, they were like, no, we want to do the biplane thing. Which it also occurred to me while I was watching it, actually, it was like, well, aren't World War II planes also don't have technology in them that would be messed up by vanity? I feel like you could go all the way up to Vietnam or something with that. But regardless, I like the biplane sequence. There's a part with Isai Morales where he's like flying in the planes and he's like laughing hysterically, and I'm like, we're watching mustachioed, he has a goatee thing, but like sort of mustachioed guy laughing at our protagonist flying in a World War I plane. I'm sorry, this is like the most silent film shit I've like ever seen. Like, are you kidding me right now? Like, I was watching it, I was like, this is like right out of Wings or something. This is nuts. I was a little surprised by that. There's no way this film, in a sense, no, it's true. There's no way this film can work without the stakes being raised incredibly high, without it being quote unquote worth it. But to make it worth it, they sort of make the whole story worth a lot less, because they're not really doing what works about these movies. I think in some cases, like the things they're going after still work in that, but like the idea that what they represent and they really push you down with it very, very much changes this movie. It makes it sort of like less malleable and a lot less fun, really. It has a crazy cast like Nick Offerman and Janet McTeer with Angela Bassett in the presidential quarters. They have a whole new like mission team, which sort of feels like they're going to launch a spin-off with just them, but I haven't heard that by the time we're shooting this. I don't know. Tom Cruise does look actually a little more worried, and the world is on him, and he's really not sure if this is all going to work out. Like, I felt the worry more so than I've ever seen him in any of these movies, which I thought was appropriate. You know, and you had, you know, Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames, their final performances, Haley Atwell. I still don't understand the point of Kenyifi, I think, from Guardians on this. I thought she was a lot of fun, but she didn't get as much to do. This time, it was just like a huge blockbuster thing. You kind of just got to get the fuck out of its way. It did have like maybe too many plot points at some points. It did push on these action sequences. It did also like go on for a very long time about exposition. It really felt like they could have spent way more time on it. I don't know. It just felt, I mean, it costs a lot of money. You can see that particularly in the sub sequence, but I really wish they had stuck to what works about these things. They're fun MacGuffin hunt things, you know. It's like, it doesn't, I get that, like, when you saw Tom Cruise fighting Henry Cavill, it sort of doesn't matter what he's fighting over. You just like that they're fighting together, and that, like, if he doesn't fight him, then, you know, the world's gonna end. And I think, like, in this, it's like, well, you know why he has to fight him, you know exactly what he's gonna do, and the ramifications of it, and the president's considering bombing everything, and, like, it just felt like things got too real, and I guess that is the point, and I get that that is the artistic intent, but it is not my most favorite Mission Impossible, and I think it's sort of lacking in a lot of places. I really had to think about the subsequence after I'd seen it to really remind myself, even though I quite liked it, or like him going into the other sub and this and that, because a lot of it that isn't the fun stuff you're into, like the biplane scene or the bottom of the ocean submarine, sort of meld into the background. You know, it really doesn't have as much good character stuff. I wish Rebecca Ferguson, like the Haley Atwell thing, I rewatched a lot of these recently, and Deadly Reckoning Part 1, more of the point of Haley Atwell in that, but I still don't really particularly think she's amazing or great or anything. Like, you know, she's just, to me, it's like, and I don't dislike her as an actress, it just didn't really work. I kind of think, you know, we got a nice send-off for Mission Impossible, and I think that's nice. It's been such a huge franchise for all of us with all of this time, and it's you know, they get rewatched, and it's like really reclaimed itself, since particularly Ghost Protocol really brought it back, regardless of quality of 3 and so forth. But there's certain things that work about this. I like certain callbacks, so particularly the thing for 3 and all that. And that worked with cutting to it, because I would not have remembered that part. But it is really trying to do a lot, and I don't know if it does successfully. It very much needs to remind you of all their references. It cuts to clip shows too frequently. I get that it's like the finale and stuff, but you could like calm down. And it just like, it felt like the stakes being raised, we really lost something really interesting from these films. And that's unfortunate. You know, I think someone else will pack it up and all that stuff, but it felt like the last one, although maybe not as good as Fallout or Rogue Nation or Ghost Protocol and stuff, was still had its moments, and I don't really see that as much with this. I don't think these stand out as spectacularly. Like the sub thing, it's like, it's interesting how they do it and have the water and the air pockets move back and forth was cool, but it didn't really like inspire me. Since then, I don't want to go, oh, you got to see this sub thing. Although I have to say though, I was thinking like, it's pretty crazy to be like, oh, I just saw a movie where Tom Cruise had to go to a sub at the bottom of the ocean, but first he had to go to one sub and then a different sub, and then, you know, it's like, it's almost like too much sometimes in this, you know, like I feel like there are other sequences that are too much, but it felt like it was too much like all the time. And, you know, I think this is a fine movie. I just think it's like a franchise entry that it still understands what the appeal was, but it sort of still lost its way in trying to like, I think, sort of overdo it. And when they kind of realized like what we already have was ridiculous enough, and people probably would have stayed with it had you just made a regular one. You know, it's great that they're anti-AI and Tom Cruise beat somebody up and said stay off the internet and all that stuff, but I had fun. I really didn't hate it as much as everyone else, but I get like why people weren't as happy about it. You know, it's sort of a different thing, and that's what they went for, and I think that's what they achieved, but I don't think it's as substantial as a artistic or achievement as, you know, Fallout or Rogue Nation, which really, you know, are some of the best spy movies of the 2010s. I don't think this is that. It's just like a huge excessive kind of finale, and it's like with that we all say adieu, but I kind of think this shows like you should have stayed with what you had and maybe, you know, ended like what we liked you for, not pushing what we like these movies and Tom Cruise for to such a degree that we can't not acknowledge how cool and awesome he is. Maybe that's his point of all these vanity projects. You know, they've been sort of fun Vanity Star projects that you get to see him do this stuff. Maybe that's the point. I don't know. But Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, it's sad to see a franchise we've all loved for so long go. But I also think at the end of this, like, there's nowhere else it could really go. And I think it's time for Ethan Hunt to hang it up, for us to sort of walk away from this and accept this is kind of what the movie is, whether we like it or not, even though we'd like it to probably have been a lot better. So if you have seen Mission Impossible Deadly Reckoning and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.